Alright, today we'll be going over the ACORD Form 126 or the Commercial General Liability Form. This is the form that you will fill out with an ACORD 125 in order to get a general liability quote for a business. So to jump right into it, the date goes in the top right hand corner. So we'll put that here. Next, you will fill out your agency information right here in the top left hand corner. Alright, and we'll put the effective date. We like to put it out for at least 1 week in advance. So we'll put this one for the 20th. Then right here is where the applicant or the business name will go. If they have a business entity, then you will put that entity name here. So if it's an LLC, we'll put the LLC name. However, if they do not have a business entity, meaning it is solely owned or sole proprietorship, then you would put their first and last name, doing business as the name of the business. But for this example, we will say we're putting an LLC. Alright, so the coverages they're looking for obviously is commercial general liability, and we will make this an occurrence policy, meaning that the insurance carrier that is providing the coverage at the time of the occurrence, it will be held liable for that claim. If it were a claims made policy, then the insurance carrier providing coverage at the time of the claim will be held liable for that claim, even though the actual incident may have occurred before that particular carrier was covering the business. So moving on to the limits. Now a standard limit or a common limit is usually a split limit of $2 million and $1 million, meaning the policy will pay up to $2 million for the year, aggregate here meaning year, and up to $1 million for any single incident. So we'll put $2 million here, and then for each occurrence, meaning any single incident, we'll put $1 million here. Alright. Limits will apply per policy in most cases. Products and completed operations aggregate, of course aggregate meaning for the entire policy or for the year. This coverage is the liability coverage for any products, which are products that you make, or completed operations. Now, where this comes into play is a lot of times with contractors or any mobile or servicing operations. Your premises will be defined as the place where you're working while you're working there. So you want to make sure that they have this completed operations coverage, because that gives them coverage after they leave the job site. Alright, so for personal and advertising injury, this is coverage for instances where you may be held liable for an injury other than physical. So for another business's loss of income due to something you may have said in an article, slander, if they come after you and sue you, then this is where this coverage will kick in. And like I said, another standard is typically $1 million or half of the general aggregate liability limits. Damage to rented premises is damage to any property that is rented to you. Could be leasing a building, leasing equipment, anything like that. Medical expense. This is basically coverage that your policy will pay out in the event that there's some type of bodily injury done to a third party, and this is coverage that will give you a limit that you can pay without having to go to court for that incident. Alright, moving on to other coverages. You don't have to fill this out, but one common other coverage would be hired and non-owned auto, meaning when any employee or the owner himself or herself uses their personal vehicle for business purposes. If there were to be an incident while they were using that that personal vehicle for business purposes, the personal insurance policy will likely not want to pay for the liability damages caused in that incident. So this is where the hired and non-owned auto coverage will come in, and it will cover the liability of that personal vehicle when used for business purposes. All right, moving on to schedule of hazards. This will be at location 1, and let's say they have first hazard here. You do not have to put the class code, but the premium basis. When all else fails, use sales. Sales can be used as sort of a standard for any quote. The only other time you would use something else is say they have an apartment building or a hotel or something like that, then you would use U for per unit. Or if they were a contractor, then you would use payroll. Or if they were a landlord, then you would use area for per 1,000 square feet. So for our example, we will use S for sales, and we will say they do $150,000 in gross sales per year, meaning they have $150,000 in exposure. And that's all you have to fill out here. All right, moving right along here. If it is a claims made policy, then you would answer claims made questions here. But for this example, it's an occurrence policy, so we're just going to skip right past that. Also, employee benefits liability. If you do select the employee coverage, which would be here, employee benefits, then you would have to fill that out. But for this example, we are not covering the employees. Now for contractors, if they do subcontract out any work, then you would have to fill contractors section out, and you will just ask them each of these questions and answer yes or no. If the answer is yes to any of these questions, you will have to provide a brief explanation or description for any of those yes answers. All right, now for products / completed operations, if they actually sold products, meaning products that they made and sold, then you would have to fill this out. For service-based businesses that do not have any products, then you would not need to fill this out, and you can skip right over it. If they do have products, you will need to fill out these questions here, and they're pretty self-explanatory. So moving on to the yes and no questions. Like I said, only if they have products would you need to fill this section here out. All right. Then we can go right down to general information. These are questions that have to be filled out regardless of what type of business it is. And just like previously, if you answer yes to any of these questions, then you will have to provide a brief explanation or description of why the answer is yes to that question. But for this example, we'll assume that the answer to all of these are no. Alright, and that is pretty much it. You will put your name here, and the producer's name, and your signature here, and then you will have the applicant sign and date it. Now, the applicant's signature and date is not required in order to get a quote back from the carrier, but it is required when you are going to bind that coverage. Also, this effective date here will have to show and reflect the date of binding. And that is all for the Commercial General Liability section, also known as the ACORD Form 126.